Hi, Grace. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. My name is Grace Wagner. I'm a poet, visual artist, and fiction writer. Um, I'm also a third year MFA candidate at the University of Houston. I defend my thesis tomorrow, actually.
Good
So
luck.
I'm really excited about that. But yeah, I write a lot of eco poetry, queer poetics, disability studies kind of poetry. And my work has been in the Offing, it's been in Salmagundi Review and Hayden's Ferry Review, the West Review, Atlanta Review, a few other places. And my art has been published in the Adroit Journal, my fiction in Penumbra Speculative Fiction magazine. And I really, for me, when it comes to writing, I very much want people to learn from my poetry, not just have epiphanies about the way life is or something like that, but to genuinely learn information about the world that we live in. And my first manuscript that I'm working on is entitled "The Gift Shop at the End of the World," and it's a collection of eco-confessional poetry about my relationship to my father, as well as the mass extinction event that we're currently undergoing.
Mm-hmm. Very
That's a little bit
interesting.
about me.
When did you first publish? And did you publish through like a magazine, or did you publish on your own? Or
I first was published in 2017. I was discovered through a reading, actually. I presented at a reading, and the head editor of Salmagundi magazine happened to be at that reading. And he asked me to submit poems to his magazine after listening to me read. Um, and my first publication was kind of unusual because I had 9 poems published. I was featured. So in yeah, that was my first publication.
very awesome. What do you think the hardest challenges are to either writing or getting published? Or
I think getting published is a really difficult a difficult thing to do in general. I've worked on the back end. I've worked as assistant poetry editor for both Gulf Coast Journal and Copper Nickel. And there's just so much good writing out there, and it's so subjective. Like if you're submitted to a journal, your submission goes through readers, and if your reader had a bad day, they may just not even register your stuff, or if they haven't eaten yet, or if any number of other variables,
mm-hmm.
so it's very easy to not get published, right?
Right.
I think getting published and sort of learning how to work your way through that labyrinth is probably the hardest part of writing for me. Actual writing is not hard for me. Like the writing comes naturally,
Yeah.
but organizing submission documents, submitting to places with enough regularity to actually get picked up, and like just making it through that initial hurdle of the slush pile can be really difficult.
I have to agree. Or if they just don't get your writing for some
Yeah,
bizarre reason,
they may not like a specific
yeah.
word that you use,
um, when do you find time to write, especially with doing your studies?
It's been difficult to find time to write this last year. Even with the pandemic keeping me at home and everything, I just haven't had the inspiration to write as frequently. I've still been writing. I probably write 1 or 2 poems a month, I would say, at right in this time period.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always kind of thought of it like seasons. I go through seasons. Like right now it's the dry season, so I'm not writing as much. But then I'll have wet seasons where I'll write a poem a week or a poem every few days, and really produce a lot of material all at once.
Mm-hmm.
So in the dry seasons, I usually spend my time working on revision, working on ordering, working on submissions. and I try not to worry too much about how much or how little I'm writing. But
It's a good
I
idea. Good.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think I find the most time to write in the mornings too. In the afternoons, I get very engaged with my paper writing and my
Mhm.
studies. Um, but usually, if I'm going to write something, I usually write it in kind of the late morning.
Sounds good. Do you have a special technique that you use, or do you follow a same routine when you're writing?
Not not for every poem, but for a lot of my poems, I do a lot of research.
Mhm.
Because a lot of my poems are very science based, I want to make sure that the information I'm conveying is correct. And I also want to learn more about my topics. So, for example, I have a series in my manuscript called the Extinction Series, and each poem is named after a recently extinct animal. And then the poem that follows, there's several different modes, but it sort of pairs the personal with the sort of global concern of extinction.
Mhm.
And for those, I looked up lists and lists and lists of recently extinct animals. I would pick ones that had interesting names and then do research into them. Or I would pick one, like maybe I was specifically looking for a frog, or maybe I was specifically looking for some kind of bird.
Mhm.
And I would pick based on whatever criteria. But then I would really dig into the research as much as I can about those animals. And sometimes it comes to play in the poem a lot. Like sometimes the poem is very heavily about that specific animal. Sometimes the poem is more about those sort of global context at the time of extinction. And sometimes the poem is even sort of more intimate or personal to my own experiences. So there are many layers of like how research comes into the poem, but I almost always do some kind of research when writing a poem.
I checked out your website, which I will link below, um, and I noticed one of your poems. You used pictures um, throughout the whole piece, and it was gorgeous. I think it was "There is no beauty in the finest cloth."
Yes, that was actually an art series, that a collage series that was published in the Adroit Journal.
Mhm.
And I love that you read it as a poem, because it is definitely also meant to be a sort of consecutive poem. The interesting thing is that they didn't quite take the entirety of the series. I think there are 3 more that don't appear online. So like the end of the poem is not available online. It's kind of interesting. But I love that you read that as a poem.
Did you take the pictures as well, or?
The pictures are from, there's 2 sources. The foreground pictures, the fashion pictures, are
Mhm.
from a little book that's like most influential fashion designers and models and photographers and that kind of thing. And it has just pictures about this big. I actually have some of them right here, but they're small pictures and they're from National Geographic. The pictures in the background
Cool.
are from National Geographic. And oh yeah, here's the 2 of the ones that didn't make it
Oh,
into
those are so
the parade.
cool.
And so this one is the last one, A Mouthful of Dirt, our final word.
Very
And so yeah, the foreground comes from the fashion picture, and then the background of either deforestation, or in this case a landfill, comes from National Geographic.
so
And
neat.
they're hand cut out, you
Hmm.
know, and collaged.
Yeah, I think it had a really good impact with the words that you put with it. Seeing the different kind of model-y pictures with the National Geographic inserts, kind of.
Mhm.
I
I
thought,
really meant them as a sort of commentary on
mhm.
the environmental impacts of the beauty industry. So like behind these beautiful clothes, there's all of this sort of environmental destruction. And
Mhm.
I also wanted to sort of draw the comparison that beauty standards are also violent and destructive, you
Mm.
know, so it kind of operates on several levels.
I also read Erosion at Honolulu's beach.
In the Lu'u Beach.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I just love the imagery you posted in that one. I mean, I felt like I was at the beach.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was a really fun poem to write. I wrote that in an eco-poetics class in my MFA, and it was in response to the American Shore Ode, which is the tradition of sort of standing at the beach and looking off into the sea and thinking about the liminal space of the land and the sea.
Mhm.
And my there were I actually wrote it in class because I am that kind of student. I have a tendency when I inspiration strikes me in class, I just write a poem right away.
Mhm.
Um, but my professor said that no one ever writes shore odes about Alaska or Hawaii. It's always the West Coast or the East Coast, or occasionally the Gulf.
Mhm.
But almost always it's either the West Coast or East Coast. And I had gone to Hawaii at a very sort of pivotal moment in my life when I was a young adult, when I was maybe 19. And the the beaches in Hawaii were so impactful on and like have stuck with me in my memory that it just felt like, you know what, I can write about Hawaii. So I took it as sort of a challenge, to write a short ode about Hawaii.
I was there maybe like 15 years ago or so, and
Hmm.
I was able to climb up Diamond Head,
Okay,
and
that's
that
cool.
was so cool. Like that's
Yeah,
one experience I'll never forget. I'll probably
we
never.
were on the Big Island, so we stayed in Kona and Hilo, and we camped in Volcano National Park, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And we went to the top of Mauna Kea, the high point in Hawaii, and I it was such a pivotal moment. I had just dropped out of college. I had just broken up with my fiance, and my brother called me and he's like, if you can buy the plane ticket, you can have 2 weeks room and board in Hawaii.
You're like,
I'm
okay,
like, yeah, okay, let's go.
this is what I need right now.
Yes.
Oh, that is so cool. Do you have anything that you would like to promote? Any?
I would very much like to promote my Twitch show. I'll put a link to it in the chat, and if you could post it,
Sure.
probably the video, twitch.tv/Princess Ink. This is I do a once a week show on Twitch, so it's live streamed. You can come online and interact with me. Um, and the way it works is we have a featured poem of the week,
Hmm.
and then I do a short mini lecture on that poem. Then I either do a small reading where I share work of my own, or I share work of someone I admire, and we have a writing prompt at the end. It's every Friday at 1 p.m.
Oh,
Central
that's very
Standard.
cool. I'm gonna have to check that out.
It's really fun. You can watch the old episodes on my Twitch page. I have 2 episodes so far. I just started the show. Um, one on Leda and the Swan and by Yeats, and one on Beowulf. So
Very cool. Well, thank you for joining me today for this interview. I had a
yeah,
great time.
this has been really fun. Let me know if you want to do this again.
I will. Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.